Thank you, Isaac, for saying I was National Director when I was 15 in 1966. Okay. First of all, I've got a very important job to do, and that is to say to Roslyn what a magnificent organiser you've been of this conference. I won't say I've known Rosalind since 6 months before she was born, because it would embarrass her. This weekend at Highley Conference Centre at SPUC's International Pro-Life Youth Conference, we've had the joy of all working together to build a peaceful, pro-life, proactive, powerful resistance movement. We're building it on the solid foundation of 50 years hard labour since the formation of the Society in 1966, the first pro-life group to be established anywhere in the world. Now here's a date for your diaries. It's the 23rd to the 25th of September this year. That's the weekend of SPUC's 50th anniversary conference at Hayes Conference Centre in Derbyshire. Beg, borrow, preferably don't steal the money to attend that conference. Come and build on what you've learned and experienced this weekend. Come and bring into our 50th annual conference your youthful vigour, vision and clear-sighted understanding of the world which you've inherited from us. Help us to fill the earth with the pro-life movement and to subdue it, to coin a phrase. We hope to be joined that weekend by the two people who founded SPUC, the world's first pro-life group, Elspeth Chowdhury-Best and Alan Smith. Elspeth and Alan are both still activists in the pro-life fight. Come along and meet them so that you can tell your children and grandchildren you did so in 50 years' time on the 100th anniversary of SPUC and the pro-life movement. Your clear-sighted understanding, which I hope has been deepened and sharpened by the Society's long experience that we've tried to share with you this weekend, is needed in fundamental areas as we take forward our peaceful, pro-life, proactive, powerful resistance movement. In particular, please remember the following lessons learned through bitter experience by SPUC over the past 50 years. Lesson number 1, as Claire McCulloch taught us yesterday, through the totally persuasive example of Good Counsel Network's effective life-saving work. Bring your faith into your pro-life work. We certainly have to fight abortion in the secular world, but why should people of religious faith leave their most important weapon at home when they go out to fight? And that weapon, of course, is prayer. And don't let anyone tell you differently. Lesson number 2, the pro-abortion lobby's claim that illegal abortion is a major cause of tragically high rates of maternal mortality in certain countries is untrue. In reality, the countries with restricted abortion, such as Ireland, Poland and Malta, have the lowest rates of maternal death. In Chile, abortion was banned in 1989. If the claims of the international pro-abortion lobby were true, one would expect to see a marked increase in deaths after that date. On the contrary, the maternal death rate in Chile has continued to decline and is now one of the lowest in Latin America. Fiorella Nash, whom you heard speaking this morning, is shortly to publish an important book covering this subject entitled The Abolition of Women. Make sure you get hold of a copy. Lesson number 3, become champions in your local areas and in the pro-life organisations to which you belong. Become champions of campaigns for just laws. Whether or not you're a Catholic, learn off by heart the words of Pope John Paul II in Evangelium Vitae, the Gospel of Life, and I quote, "In the case of an intrinsically unjust law, such as a law permitting abortion or euthanasia, it is never licit to obey it or to take part in a propaganda campaign in favour of such a law or vote for it." Now, you don't have to be a Catholic to understand that you cannot do an intrinsic evil. You cannot vote for an intrinsic evil. What part of that sentence from Pope John Paul II can we possibly fail to understand? I quote again, "In the case of an intrinsically unjust law, such as a law permitting abortion or euthanasia, it is never licit to obey it or to take part in a propaganda campaign in favour of such a law or vote for it." And yet pro-life groups all over the world are prepared to campaign for legislation which would protect most unborn children, but which would allow disabled babies or babies conceived in rape to be killed. Disabled babies like the beautiful Sarah Macmillan, whose unforgettable story we heard from her mother Catherine yesterday. My dear friends, if anyone ever attempts you to join campaigns which make exception for particular babies on the fallacious grounds of so-called legitimate political tactics, remember Catherine Macmillan's talk yesterday or replay the video on SPUC's website, where I expect you'll be able to find it very soon. Or make sure you come to SPUC's 50th annual conference, where you can hear Rebecca Kiesling, who was conceived in rape and is one of the most powerful pro-life witnesses in the world. And remember what Colin Hart told us yesterday. Voting for legislation which makes exceptions in the case of rape and disability, for example, is firstly wrong, and secondly, it doesn't work, as SPUC has learned from bitter experience. Lesson number 4. The artificial separation of the unitive and procreative elements of sexual intercourse is not only the basis of contraception, it's also the basis of early abortion, and therefore of later abortion too, and of all attacks on the sanctity of human life, including and especially, of course, in vitro fertilization. It underpins today's culture of death. According to the manufacturers, one of the contraceptive pill's modes of action is to cause an early abortion. And in vitro fertilization as an industry is vastly more destructive of innocent human lives than the abortion industry. Relatively, according to peer-reviewed research, for every baby born by IVF, 23 are either discarded or frozen or used in destructive experiments or miscarry. Lesson number 5. The pro-life movement cannot possibly succeed in its efforts to end abortion if the family based on marriage between a man and a woman is destroyed. A major way in which the so-called homosexual rights lobby is actively undermining the family and the culture of life is, for example, through targeting its message at little children in their schools, including in the UK in Catholic primary schools. I've little doubt that the same pattern is repeated in other countries too. And I'm sorry to have to share with you that homosexual militants are being invited into schools, as I say, in our country, including in Catholic schools with the blessings of the local bishop, to train teachers how to educate little boys as young as 4 years old that they might grow up to marry a man rather than a woman, and the same with little girls. Now, what happens when little Johnny at Our Lady's School, say, in South London, says to his teacher, "Please, miss, can boys grow up to marry a man and have babies like mummies and daddies can?" Without a shadow of a doubt, very many teachers will say, yes, they can, in a different way, but yes, they can. As you know, same-sex couples are now demanding the right to have children. making it even more difficult for pro-life groups effectively to oppose surrogacy and in vitro fertilization. And bearing in mind the massively anti-life nature of in vitro fertilization, which I've just explained, you can see how defending the right to life of unborn children will increasingly be viewed as an attack on the rights of homosexual couples. Lesson number 6. It's never right, as some in the pro-life movement claim, to expel a pre-viable baby from his or her mother's womb with the intention of saving the mother's life. I won't go into that today, but if you go to my blog, you will see there a full explanation of the ethical position and also of Catholic teaching from Dr. Anthony McCarthy, SPUC's Director of Education and Publications, here this weekend, Rosalind's boss. Lesson number 7 is related to lesson number 1, which was to take our religious faith into our pro-life work. Let me explain. The most notable achievement of the pro-life movement is that we exist. Yes, pro-life organisations have enjoyed successes and have saved lives. We've also had our setbacks. But brutally realistically, we're tiny compared with the overwhelming reach of the culture of death and compared, in particular, with the universal reach of the Catholic Church. That's why Catholics here, and everyone who has an interest in the common good, must study carefully what's happening at the highest levels in the Catholic Church and take action, and we must have the maturity to speak out when things are badly wrong at the highest levels of the Church in England and in other parts of the world, including Rome. I don't have time to go into it all today, except to say that church leaders at the highest levels are collaborating with the United Nations and facilitating the imposition of anti-family, anti-life, including pro-abortion legislation worldwide. In response to this, 2 years ago, the Council of the Society for the Protection of Unborn Children, which are ordinary people from up and down the country, unanimously backed the formation of an international coalition of 26 pro-life and pro-family groups on 5 different continents called Voice of the Family, and it's funded and organised by SPUC. Voice of the Family's primary purpose worldwide is to support, thank God, many Orthodox bishops and cardinals who are prepared to do their sacred duty as pastors to protect our families, to uphold parents as the primary educators of their families, and to defend the truth about life and the truth about the truth and meaning of human sexuality. We must have the courage and the barefaced cheek to stand up and challenge our pastors in this respect, and we have the right and duty to do so under canon law. When I decided to start working for SPUC 42 years ago at national level, firstly as a volunteer like you this weekend, I had a clear vision. I was clear that the legalisation of abortion was the worst disaster ever suffered in British history. Already back in 1974, more babies have been killed by abortion than British citizens have been killed in all the wars put together in recorded British history. I had a vision of building an army of foot soldiers, the length and breadth of Britain, to leaflet every household in Britain every couple of months. Unfortunately, other things got in the way, like the rally I found myself organising, which brought 100,000 people to Hyde Park early in the 1980s, and all the other campaigns since then. But I still have that vision, and on Monday I'm getting on a train to Bristol to launch a door-to-door leafleting group there. Ed Smith, one of the founders of the Alliance of Pro-Life Students, said to me yesterday, 100,000 people in Hyde Park, we could never do that now. And that's probably true. But supposing over the next few years we could find 10,000 people in towns and villages around Britain who were willing to go out every 2 weeks to leaflet certain streets in their neighbourhood, Just imagine that. Just imagine the impact of that, of 10,000 people doing the leafleting and on the general public hearing the pro-life message from the movement so much in evidence in their area. The number of people I'm meeting in Bristol on Monday is 2. And I'm willing to go anywhere in the country if there are 2 people who share this vision. Social networking is important. Parliamentary lobbying is important. Taking our pro-life message with trained speakers is important. Working at the United Nations for months and months every year is important. And SPUC does all these things, and I hope you can help us in those areas too. But I believe that to stop abortion, we have to change the hearts and minds of ordinary people in our local areas, and that an important way of reaching them and changing their minds is by door-to-door leafleting. If you can see this, if you're interested in helping on this, please let me know. I'll willingly travel anywhere, as I say, to join you and help to get this campaign going. Yesterday, someone came to this youth conference who made a gift bigger than I ever remember the society receiving before. It's a gift which I believe will give us all the resources we will ever need to build the pro-life army which transforms Britain into a culture of life and transform the world. The gift was not a gift of money. It was the gift of a mother's heart, the loving heart of Catherine Macmillan for her beautiful daughter Sarah. Catherine and Sarah have certainly given me renewed strength and determination to work till the day I drop for unborn children. And instead of your kind applause for my few closing words to you this afternoon, let's instead keep a minute's silence for the late, great Sarah Macmillan and reflect on what we can do in our lives to save the lives of unborn children, in thanksgiving for Sarah's life and in thanksgiving for the loving heart of her brave, battered, but far from broken, beautiful mother. A minute's silence for little Sarah Macmillan, please.